Hey guys, it's Pastor Dave again with another episode of Lessons for Life. And do we have quite an episode? It's going to be on COVID and the church. Before I actually introduce our guest, I have a special friend that co-hosts the show and that is also their pastor. Pastor Daryl, come on down.
Hi, Dave.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. But I'm not here to talk about my health or your health. We're here to talk about somebody we mutually know, right?
Indeed, indeed.
Why don't you introduce him and tell him how you know him, and then I'll tell him how I know him. Go ahead.
All right. I've known this couple since 2006. I'd like to introduce to you Mike and Annette Smitley.
Hi.
Hi there. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm excited.
Welcome to the show. You know, I met you guys in like 06, 07 when I was coaching your son, Jake, and he was such a coachable, athletic, respectful young man. And that's when we first got to know one another. And you guys were such encouraging parents about everything that was going on. And that's not always the case. So we kind of started our relationship at that point. And then you guys started coming to church around maybe 2010, 2011. But it's great to have you on our show tonight.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It's great. Now, I know him a little different aspect. I can go back to the 70s and tell you exactly how I know Mike. I was a teacher then before I was a preacher. And in my very first class that I ever had, Mike Smitley was in that class. He was in the 8th grade. I would concur with everything you said, Daryl. He was bright and smart, never caused a problem, and he passed government and graduated. I actually had you twice, didn't I, Mike?
You did, yes.
And
Eighth grade and government.
And he needed government to graduate, and I worked on those scores a lot of time, Mike, and finally ended up passing you.
Yes, and I appreciate that to this day, Dave. Thank you.
Now, Annette I only met through church, but you know, we never start a program without finding out what your favorite Bible verse is. And since I never met you before, Annette, until you started coming to church, I would like to hear and evaluate what your favorite Bible verse is. What is it, Annette?
Well, you know, it seems like such a simple verse, but I have to tell you, I repeat it to myself all the time when I get up in the morning, when I go to bed at night, and throughout the day. And it's Psalm 46:10. Be still and know that I'm God. And again, it's just that whole bit of being calm so that I can hear that voice, that nudging, that, see that wink, whatever it is, I'm looking for it. It helps me be more on alert. It helps me be focused on God rather than on myself. And it also helps me to keep seeking solitude, through the day. We can get so busy. And for me, I'm a project person. I can get into a project and just be so involved that I forget just to be still and look for God in the midst of it.
Indeed.
Okay, Mike, your turn.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you. My favorite verse is a verse that's relatively new to me. Is my favorite verse, but it's Romans 10:13, and it's for anyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. And that has been very important for me to remember the anyone. In this time, it doesn't matter who you are, what you've done. It doesn't matter what the color of your skin is, who you love, but anyone can be brothers or sisters in Christ. So it's been very powerful for me and helps me remember that we all can be saved.
Now, I'm going to turn it over to Daryl in a second because I came to the church later. In fact, I've been in your church, Daryl, for a couple of years, but I was ministering on Sunday, so I didn't have any idea. I lost touch with you entirely. But I do know this. Daryl and I have churches that are very similar. COVID destroyed attendance in the church. And people had all kinds of excuses for not coming back. And well, I want to start before you left the church because of COVID. Daryl, you had experiences with him, and Would you lead through how active they were in the church and what a loss it was when they left?
Oh, absolutely. Well, they were regular attenders, and regular attender used to mean every Sunday, rain or shine. And nowadays, I think I heard on the radio that you know regular attenders are basically people who come between half and 2/3 of the time. But Mike and Annette, if they're in town, they're not hiking or traveling. If they're in town, they're in church, and they've also been active in the community as well as our church. So, in fact, during COVID, they were, they started cutting up wood and delivering it to people and delivering it to the church, just leaving it out in the front yard, and people come by and pick it up. So they've been quite active in our church.
Okay, let's follow through with that. And Daryl, you can help me here. All of a sudden, their seats were vacant, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And it was a weird time. We're trying to navigate what the CDC was saying and what our denomination was saying, and so we kind of in 2020 we were, recording the sermons, and then not meeting, and then during the summer we met outside, and but all the time, Mike and Annette chose not to attend even when we were outside, and that was kind of a little confounding to me at first, but then I really understood where they were coming from. So
Instead
Mike
of
and
you,
Annette,
Mike, oh, go ahead. Go ahead and finish.
yeah. So when COVID hit, what were some of the things that were going on in your life and in your family that made you kind of come to that decision of vacating the pew?
Well, COVID was new to everyone, and as information started coming out, we learned very quickly that we had people in our family, parents, that were compromised and were very susceptible to some serious repercussions from COVID. And we also had a couple of babies born. And as we're learning and navigating the beginning of the COVID pandemic, we as an extended family had decided to protect the ones that we loved. We were going to do our version of a bubble with the extended family, which didn't mean total isolation, but it meant that we chose not to, or to extremely limit ourselves to large gatherings. And Annette, do you have anything you'd like to?
And also as it was happening, and like you said, like Mike said, that, we were learning more about COVID during that first year, 2020, toward the end of that year, our family doctor contracted COVID and died. And so when he passed, his office did send some things out to us, and they said, if you are immune compromised, or if you gather, we think that this is an airborne thing, and we're just still learning about it, please be cautious. So when you have somebody that you've trusted all your life, and with your life telling you those things, I mean, we took it very seriously.
I just got one quick question. Did you have a protest over the shot at all, or have you influenced at all?
No,
No,
we were excited when the vaccinations came out.
So that did not influence your decision like it did some to stay away or leave the church. Okay, Daryl, why don't you continue a little bit and let them tell how long they stayed away and what your role is in bringing them back?
Yeah, well, you know, um, how were you like able to, worship the Lord during the shutdown, and even afterwards? When kind of things started get back to normal, you kind of were still kind of in that bubble. How are you able to worship the Lord?
So Daryl was kind enough to start recording his sermons. And so we did ask him to continue to do that. And I know that there were some challenges with it, but Mike and I would sit on our porch, and usually it would take us a week to get, we were always a week behind, but we'd sit on our porch and we would listen to the sermons together and have our morning coffee. And the nice part about that was that we would stop the recording. We'd look up Bible passages. We'd talk about something that was said. We would pause. A lot of the sermons were directly related to things that were going on around us in regards to COVID and isolation, and people having differences of opinions of how they were handling some of the things related to COVID. So a lot of the sermons were really poignant and were really important to help us all get through that. So we had a lot of opportunities to stop and also send those on to other folks who were feeling the same things that all of us were feeling during that time.
And I think it actually brought us closer from the fact that it's different when we could stop and discuss things right away. Now, we will discuss sermons on our ride home, after church now and even before COVID, but, you don't remember everything. So if something really touched us, we could stop and talk about it. And I think that was special. And then thank you for recording that. We know that wasn't something that's easy to do, but we appreciate it. And we also took the opportunity to share those sermons with other people that we loved, and including some friends of ours. And they also expressed appreciation. Some of them had attended church before, and they appreciated that very much.
And so one of the things that was going on is you were kind of front line taking care of parents. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So I am blessed that my parents are my next door neighbors. We kid that we live the everybody loves Raymond life, where mom and dad live right across the street. But that's a blessing, and they were both in their 80s, and they needed some support with daily things, and COVID made that much more difficult. Also, when you think about groceries and all the things that different people need to live, so that was difficult to navigate through that. And again, that is one of the reasons that we made the decision as an extended family to do what we were going to do.
Are you guys listening to what they're saying? I don't know what the reason is that some of you out there may have quit church, but they didn't really quit church. They just quit going to the body of believers in a building. Their faith remains strong. So no matter what your reason is, there's a million different reasons. But I'd like to explore with Daryl and talk to Daryl a little bit and you about this. How long did you stay away from church?
I believe we stopped attending in March of 2020, and then we didn't go back until the very beginning of 2023.
2023. Yeah.
By then, the threat of COVID was not as bad as it was before. You could get sick. If you had your shots, the chances that you were going to die was very slim. I think Daryl was involved in helping you come back because he never left touch with you. So, Daryl, take it from there and then talk about why they came back.
Well, first I'd like to say that, I did respect the fact that they were quite selfless in their motivation for not returning when they did, when not, maybe some other people did, because they were, they had some babies in the family, and their parents were old and vulnerable, and it was really a sacrifice for them. And they didn't just say, we're not gonna come to church, because there were people who wouldn't come to church, but they go to other gatherings, and they were pretty strict about that and keeping their bubble. But as time progressed, it kind of got, like things started to kind of go back to normal, but nothing was really normal about COVID. But I would check in on them from time to time and just see how they were doing, and they would always assure me, hey, we're going to come back, and I believed them. But as time went on in 2021, 2022, etc., I started like, okay, are you guys coming back? And So how did you guys arrive at that decision to when you did finally return?
Hmm. Well, lots of things come into decision. The medical community, had learned how to handle COVID. We actually, the whole family, since we were in the bubble, we all got COVID at the same time. Thankfully, everybody had mild cases. So we understood more what it was about. We had been talking about, even though we had the church services online, it's not the same. 2D Pastor Daryl isn't the same as 3D Pastor Daryl. And, things like the music and things like that weren't online. And so our hearts ached, and we were missing coming and gathering with our church family again. And I specifically remember one of the last times we saw Daryl out in the community before we came back. We had stopped and we were talking, and we had expressed how much we missed some people at church, and even asked about some of the people. And we talked about how much of a blessing they were to us. And Pastor Daryl mentioned to both of us that we were also a blessing to the people at church, that they weren't just a blessing to us, but we were a blessing to them also, and the people missed us also. And I think that is all of those things helped us decide that it was time to come back.
Well, and I think that really touches on our need as human beings for community. We need to be loved. We also need to love. We need to serve. We need to be served. We need to encourage. We need to be encouraged, and all that happens in the context of church. And that's one of the things that I think is so important. The Bible says, "Forsake not the gathering of yourselves together," and there's so many benefits that come with that. I know that kind of, we don't often think about the impact. We think about others who, we miss, but then it just struck me in that moment that, there were so many people that told me that they had missed, the blessing of having you there. And so it's a two-way street. I also want to say that, we don't often understand what somebody else is going through. And you helped me to understand, because I thought, everything seemed to be back to normal, but you know, it wasn't really normal for you all, in the sense that I just thought, well, the chances right now, getting into 2022 and close to 2023, that the chances were so small that anything would happen. And I remember that you guys shared about experience that you had in your family, that there was an minimal chance of something, but it did happen, and that helped me to understand. Would you share a little bit about that? It helped me to understand that, okay, maybe things, I'm seeing it through my lens, but I really didn't understand fully how you guys were looking at it. It helped me to understand.
Many years ago, we had a child who had 1 in 10,000 chance of having an ailment that took his life. And I think when you have something like that happen in your life, that statistical things like, oh, it's very rare that you're going to die of this, or get sick or have long-term effects of it. But for us, it's a very real thing, because when you're that 1 in 10,000, I think that those statistics don't mean a whole lot to you in terms of, I don't find any solace in a statistical analysis of that sort of thing. And I think that did also play into our decision as well. We also did have some friends who later in 20, Mike's mom passed. And then also we had a friend who, even though we were kind of well out of that whole COVID thing, ended up in the ICU, and a younger friend who was in there and nearly took his life. And so even though there were many people who were, going on with their regular lives, we were still feeling that weight of, what about the one, or what about our friend who is now in ICU for, and nearly passed. And yeah, we're in 2022, or we're in, that was just for us, it still seemed like it was right there. And so we were very, very guarded.
This is an amazing story. I'm just captivated by what happened. And I don't know, just a thought. As I hear you talk and have my own church, I realize that when people quit coming, no matter what the reason, your church is not the same. It leaves a big hole in the church. You're missing the church, and Daryl's talking about the church missing you. I've only known you guys in church because I didn't come there until after I retired from the ministry. And I'll tell you, I look at you all the time and see how essential you are to the church. Do you feel the same way, Daryl?
I do, absolutely. And
It's great.
that was part of why I was so frustrated, because like selfishly, their encouragement and their presence, and I was feeling kind of left out of being blessed by them. So it's kind of selfish on my part as well.
I know you said you felt a hole in your heart, basically, because you weren't seeing the people at church. Did you listen to Daryl and my testimony and realize how essential you are to the church?
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. We've always felt great love from all of the people that we would encounter at church. Even when we weren't there, we had people send us cards. We had phone calls. Might have an interaction at the grocery store with, members of the church. So absolutely, we felt that. We never felt like we were lost or that we were not. We knew we would return. We just didn't know when. But there was a turning point, I think, for us in that decision to come back. And I kind of likened it to like a Grand Canyon experience.
Yeah.
And I don't know if have y'all been to the Grand Canyon?
Yeah.
So, I've been to the Grand Canyon. Mike and I've been to the Grand Canyon, I don't know, 3 or 4 times. And every time it's different. The Grand Canyon is such a majestic thing. It just takes your breath away. It's just awe-inspiring to think of God's work there. And I know that every time Mike and I have been, we feel this sort of sense of spirituality that you only get when you go to the Grand Canyon. Now, I can remember going to the Grand Canyon, and I can have my pictures of it, and I can listen to talk radio about the Grand Canyon. I can do all of those things, but it's not the same as being at the Grand Canyon and experiencing that spiritual sort of awakening that happens there. And I liken that to going to church, because though Mike and I were, still engaging in the sermons and reading our Bible and tithing, we were doing all of those things, there was something missing. It's like talking about the Grand Canyon, looking at our pictures of the Grand Canyon, but it wasn't going to church, because church is a visceral experience. Church is you go in and you hear Tina, our pianist organist, playing this music that reverberates in there, and it touches your body. You can feel it in your chest. It's the weight of the people filling the pew that you sit on. It's the children laughing behind you. It's the cross in front of you. It's the worship song leader who comes on and is singing with just this beautiful voice that I don't have. And it's just all of these things together, and the sunlight coming through the window, and just all of that, it brings the Spirit of God just so close there in the room. And I felt, and I think until you go back, it's hard to create that any other way. And so I would say it's a visceral experience to be in that company with God in the room and that Spirit in the room. And I can't describe it any other way. And I don't know, I know people have their reasons, but I would say if you want to have a metaphysical, amazing, joyful experience, I've only found that in places like church or the Grand Canyon or I've only found it in places like that.
Before This is one of the most critical points of our message tonight. What I mean by that is, and Daryl, you can add to this too, it was hard for us to find somebody to interview that left during COVID and came back. We have talked to a lot of people, and Daryl has too, that talk about the fact that they got mad, churches closed, they were going to find a church maybe that was open during COVID. Many people got political and thought it was all a government conspiracy, but no matter what the reason was, people left the church. And many churches went from small churches from 100, 125 to now they have 40 and 50. So people are not coming back. Add to that, Daryl, and we'll talk to the Smithleys. Do you have the same experience I did as a pastor?
Yeah, absolutely, Dave. And I think Annette's illustration is just apropos. It's like right on the nose. The brilliance and the specter of the Grand Canyon, you can't explain it. And that's how it is with church. It's a different experience to be there than it is to watch from home. And a lot of people have gotten comfortable with that, and they're missing out, and people in church are missing out on their presence as well. It's a two-way street. So I agree 100%, Dave.
Now, the church will only exist if you support it and believe in the Lord with all your heart, mind, and soul. If you're sitting out there as we close, and we are speaking to you, that you had a good church background and you left. First week it was hard without church. Second week, less hard.
Yeah.
But now, folks, we're in our fourth year. If you were in church and supporting a church and you're still gone, let this message hit you in the heart. And I want to see you in church on Sunday. Now we have to close. We could talk about a lot more things, but time goes fast here on Abundant. So we're going to say goodnight and God bless. So let's all wave goodbye. Bye, everybody.